go. Well, when it comes to talking about grief, it is never easy. So where do you begin when it comes to mourning lives lost?
Well, our next guest has that answer in her new handbook, Modern Loss, an interactive guide to moving through grief and building resilience. She offers candid, practical, and even funny advice on how to confront a future without your person. Rebecca Soffer joins us now from Washington, D.C. Welcome to the show, Rebecca. You are on a book tour, so you are in a hotel. How are you?
I mean, year 3 of COVID, we're at the point where I'll just go onto national TV with a large bed behind me. We're there, Cynthia and Mel. We're there. We're there.
We're there. We really are.
Okay.
Well, listen, thank you so much for writing this book. And we'll begin sort of at the beginning of your journey with this, because, Rebecca, you lost your mother in a car crash 16 years ago. And then 4 years later, you lost your father. And not many people grow up and then plan to be a grief expert. So at what point did that become your calling?
Yeah, I would say I absolutely did not grow up thinking I would be a grief expert. I thought I was going to be a journalist who worked in political satire. That was the track that I was on. I was working for the Colbert Report when my mother was killed. But it became very clear very quickly when I was 30 that when you go through a profound loss, and especially at that age, when you're very much in build mode, and everybody around you is in build mode, but you're also in loss mode, that's extremely isolating. And we just don't do a good job of talking about it in casual conversation. And just, you have so many people who are just feeling like in their own bubble. So I wanted to help normalize it for other people who were also feeling as isolated as I was.
As you point out in your book, people, quite frankly, suck at talking about grief. Yeah. I remember when one of my friends lost her father, she said she wanted to write a book herself called Death for Dummies. Listen, if people are watching, what are some suggestions of where people can begin when it comes to talking about the topic of grief in a productive way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we get in our heads a lot, like we're supposed to say the perfect thing. We have to solve everything. We have to make it better for that person. But you don't. You don't have to do anything. You just need to make it very clear that whatever they're going through is not going to scare you off, that you're aware that grief is not a contagious experience, and that you're willing to sit with them in something that is really scary and uncertain, and just go through it with them and feel the feelings alongside them. What people want more than anything is to feel acknowledged in the fact that they're going through something really hard. They're not asking you to fix it for them. They're definitely not asking you to ignore it, though. Because when we ignore it and we feel really uncomfortable, we make it so much worse. We just make someone feel like what they're going through doesn't even exist.
That's a great point. It's wild because you say that when we think about the title, Modern Loss, it's really interesting because grief is evolving, you write, as time goes on. And this is something that we don't necessarily think about. In fact, you write that the way that people grieve today, it's actually quite different than the way people grieved maybe 30 years ago. How so?
I mean, look, I wasn't grieving 30 years ago, so I don't exactly know how people grieved, but I think grief is grief is grief. I think that social media has allowed us to very easily ask people to be witnesses to the things that we're going through in life. That goes for the good, like, oh, look at this cool dress I'm wearing, or the summer glow. I made notes when you were doing that segment, there's stuff there. But also just like the stuff that's really hard. We, with very low touch ability, are able to share with our networks that we are missing somebody. We would like them to know that it's our person's birthday, or that Mother's Day is hard, or that we had a miscarriage. We have the ability to ask people to be our witnesses. And I think that with regard to social media is actually a really wonderful thing, because we are able to share our stories. And when you share stories about what you're going through, that's how you can really convey to other people what it might feel like. And when you can convey that to other people, then you make them a better support system to other people. And the ripple effect is such that when someone goes through it, maybe we'll all be better primed to support each other. And that's my very lofty goal. So I think that, people may have grieved in the same way 30 years ago, but I think that we're much more open and needing to share it. And especially after 3 years, year 3 of, COVID, we all need to share what we're going through. We've all been going through a rough time. So we have to share our stories.
I mean, you just touched on it. The news is heavy. If it's not COVID, we're hearing about wars, mass shootings. I mean, it's impossible to escape it with social media. Can you explain this idea of collective grief?
Sure. I mean, I think that so many of us have been feeling dejected and disillusioned, if not every single minute of the day, surely at different times. It's been a very long 2 years. Here in the United States, we just crossed the million person death mark from COVID. And that's an official number. The more real number is probably about 1.2 million. And for every COVID death, you have 9 people who are directly grieving that loss. So just think about all the grief we're having in the world from death loss alone, not to mention societal grief. I know that in Canada, like like you're still feeling it. There had been curfews up until recently. We had virtual schooling. We've had roles that have been taken away from us, coping mechanisms that have been taken away from us just in the form of like easily going to hug someone or having brunch with our people or being able to go to a wedding and celebrate together. We've lost jobs. We've had so much grief. And I think that what people really should do is acknowledge that even if they haven't lost somebody to death loss, the grief is very real. And what you're going through, if it feels hard, it's worth acknowledging and respecting and examining and figuring out what you need in your life to make you feel a little bit better and more resilient.
Yeah, you put that in such a great way. So you also write in the book that our culture is obsessed with war metaphors because, we often say things like, you're so strong or you're going to win this battle. And you say this is actually problematic when you're talking to somebody who is grieving. Why?
I mean, I can't stand it. I can't stand it. First of all, I mean, grief is not a battle. Nothing adverse is a battle. When you have cancer, you're not like going to war. You're going up against a disease that may or may not win based on sheer luck sometimes. So I think when we set people up for like, you're going to fight this valiantly, I mean, you can fight as hard as you want, but like still you're dealing with things that are somewhat out of your control. When it comes to grief, I think we love telling people, you're so strong. I don't know how you do it. Like, oh, you can handle this. Like, sure, like we can handle it, but we don't need to feel like we're strong all the time in the ways that people like to think strength is, which is like pushing forward, keeping going. Sometimes being strong and being resilient is acknowledging that you need to lay in a crumpled heap on your bathroom floor or take a mental health day from work because you really need to just center yourself or talk to your boss about different ways that you can be supported or tell your friends what you need, or stand up for yourself when someone's making you not feel great, when they're offering platitudes, So I like to, instead of war metaphors, I like crab metaphors because to me, crabs, first of all, they're the most resilient creatures on earth, the horseshoe crab. And when it comes to resilience, they also know how to shift. That's what grief is. It's shifting every single day. It's an evolving experience. You're shifting your footing. You're trying to hang on to shifting sands and tides. And you look really weird and wonky while you're doing it. Like crabs, not the most elegant to look at, not the most beautiful, but they get stuff done and they don't care that they look weird. And that is what grief is. It's the long arc of things. You have to view this as a day-to-day marathon that's for the rest of your life instead of some sprint where you're going to like win or lose a battle. And I say that not to be a downer, but to actually be encouraging. You just gotta, go with the flow sometimes. And when it feels worse, remember that it's not always going to feel worse.
There is a chapter in your book called Trigger Days where you offer really creative ideas about different ways to maintain a connection with a person you lost. Can you share some of those ideas with us?
Sure. I mean, like there's so many. I could go on for hours about this, but I think that we get really overwhelmed when we're thinking about an anniversary or like the day someone died or someone's birthday or, Mother's Day, Father's Day is coming up. These are really difficult holidays and Hallmark days to get through because also the marketing machine of companies, it's in action like months in advance. Like, I've been getting Father's Day emails for like 3.5 months by now. It's like enough already. And so I think that there are different ways where if you do feel like you have the wherewithal to reframe a day, if it's going to be hard, it's going to be hard. You can't force a day to not be hard. You have to go with the flow here. But there are different creative ways like rituals, like for example, the Little Free Library. I love that idea. It's something that you can order. It's a nonprofit organization and you can literally donate a library or have it in your front yard if you get a permit or, donate it to an organization and fill it with books that, were evocative of your person's spirit and their likes and their interests. I love that idea because it really is a way to show people what your person was all about, even if they'll never get to meet them. Another idea is the phone of the wind, which is something that was created by somebody in Japan many years ago. It's a phone that's actually like a rotary phone that's disconnected. And he used it as a way to call his cousin, who he missed so much, and just talk to him. And I know that, yeah, maybe that sounds kind of woo, but when you're going through loss, not a lot of things sound woo. Anything that sounds like it might feel comforting and like a creative channel through which you can stay connected to your person's memory is going to be something that you want to try. And, I think that the biggest advice that I was ever given with regard to these days is let the day be the day. You can plan as much as you like. You can schedule what you're going to do on Mother's Day or Father's Day or your person's birthday, and you think it's going to make you feel better. Maybe you want to ignore it completely. Maybe you want to actually celebrate that person's memory. But if you wake up that morning and feel like you're not into anything that you had planned, let yourself allow the day to be the day and just do whatever feels right. There are no rules. As long as you're not hurting yourself or anybody else, don't let anyone tell you what to do with your own loss.
Yeah.
Rebecca, we want to remind everybody it is called the Modern Loss Handbook, an interactive guide to moving through grief and building your resilience. What a fantastic conversation. You're going to help a lot of people today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.